Well, welcome everybody. I want to thank Adam Geisen for referring me to Arlen Beeples. And Arlen, thank you for inviting me to provide the Ed Leaders Network with this very important webinar. Today I'm presenting a program called Surefire Strategies for Success Over Stress. And this webinar is based on my unique book for educators, The Teacher's Ultimate Stress Mastery Guide. In a moment, I'll show you a picture of what that looks like. But the Teacher's Ultimate Stress Mastery Guide came out of a keynote speech that I did for the National Association of Elementary School Principals. So I'm glad to see that many people in the audience today actually work in the elementary school environment. That's where the book came from. And I will be talking to you about much that's in the book, but obviously we can't talk about the whole book, which has 77 stress mastery principles in there for teachers. So if you're interested in the book, getting an e-version of the book where I can just send it over the internet to you, it's only $15, and you just have to email me at that address, drjack@advisingtheadvisors.com. If you want a hard copy, you have to go to the publisher. I don't have hard copies left of the book, but I can, and that's $27, but the e-version is $15. So if you're really interested in what I'm telling you and you want to learn more, it's all going to be in the book. All right, can you just show them the book now so they'll see what that looks like, Arlen? Yeah, there it is. The Teacher's Ultimate Stress Mastery Guide, 77 Proven Prescriptions to Build Your Resilience. Okay, if I can have the slide come down now so that I can look at my background. There you go. So the interesting thing with all of this is that I did this presentation and Corwin Press was in the audience, and they came up to me and said, you have to turn this into a book. And I said, what do you mean? There are no books for stress mastery for teachers? And they said, as a matter of fact, there aren't. And then I did some investigating and found I couldn't find a school of education that offered a stress mastery course in college. So people started telling me if we told the education majors how stressful the job is, they'd leave the major. So this was groundbreaking for me to be able to present something that needed to be presented, and that's why I wrote the book. One of the best ways to help prevent principal burnout or teacher burnout is by providing professional development opportunities, and the Ed Leaders Network, of course, does just that in a very supportive way. So I really appreciate this invitation. What you're going to hear today is the blueprint for success that I've used for 47 years, not just with educators, but with elite athletes, including 3 Olympic gold medal winners. My background is I started off as an industrial psychologist. I then went back to school and took a postdoctorate in clinical and sports psychology and wound up working with elite athletes, including gold medal winners, and realized many years ago that the exact same principles that I use with elite athletes, I could use with teachers and educators of all types. So why not provide them with the exact same experience? And I also wrote a book for financial advisors, so I offer it to them. I teach doctors the same thing, lawyers, so the principles work for everyone. So here's what you're going to learn today. First, I'm going to teach you the #1 cause of any stress that you'll ever experience. Now, you may say, well, how does Jack know the stress that I'm going to experience? I don't have to know what it is. I know the cause of every stress, and it's caused by us. And I'm going to explain all of that very carefully, because how you deal with stress is one of the most important determinants of how you'll perform in your career. And we now know that it can even determine how long you will live, whether you will get ill, whether you will maintain that illness, whether you can overcome that illness. The stress underlies much of what goes on in our bodies and our minds, and I'm going to teach you how to recognize it and get rid of it. So pretty good reason to be here, right? And secondly, I'm going to teach you how to engage a warp speed mental toughness technique that I've used with athletes, with doctors, with lawyers, with teachers. It's something that you can use quickly to reduce stress, self-doubt, worry, anxiety, whenever these emotions creep in. Just like the elite athletes that I've worked with, I'm going to teach you a method to release the huge untapped potential that lies within each of you. Why do I say that? because I believe that most of you have never tapped into your real potential. This potential often gets buried not only under stress, but its bad cousins, self-doubt, lack of confidence, worry, and anxiety. In my 47 years career as a professional psychologist, I've helped hundreds of elite athletes and hundreds of educators who never lived up to their potential to become champions at what they do. I believe that all of you are gifted, but many people don't open their gifts. They just let them stay buried under lack of confidence and fear and things of that nature. We're going to talk about that today. Now, we all think we know what causes our stress. For example, let me share with you some of my educator clients, what they believe their stress was when they came to me for coaching. Client number one. This is an educator who sought out my help, believing that her stress was from struggling to balance the demands of her job with her family needs and her own well-being. She just didn't know how to do this 24/7 balancing act. She thought that was the cause of her stress. Client number two. This client came to me because his stress, he thought, was from trying to manage tight budgets and navigate complex school boards and central office staff and community expectations. He thought that that was the cause of his stress. And client number three was a principal that was consumed with staff shortage issues, trying to do more with less all the time. Now, what did these three clients have in common? They all suffered from major stress. But would it surprise you to know that none of the situations they faced and complained about actually caused their stress? What we know now, and this is probably the most important discovery in the field of psychology and psychotherapy in the last 50 years, is that negative, self-defeating emotions, such as stress, anxiety, fear, frustration, anger, impatience, depression, are never caused by events and situations that occur in your work or your life. Let me repeat that. Negative, self-defeating emotions such as stress, anxiety, fear, frustration, anger are never caused by events and situations that occur in your work or life. They're actually caused by the conversations you have with yourself about those events. It's the conversations that determine the outcome. And most of us are not aware of those conversations because they happen automatically. They're unfortunate habits, and that's what we're going to focus on today. Now, let me give you my email address again. You don't have to put the slide up, but let me just give you my email address because I'm going to talk fast so that you can get as much information as I can pack into this session. I don't expect you to be able to take cogent notes during this, but you can email me with any questions you either don't get to ask or you prefer not to ask in this venue. My email address is drjack@advisingtheadvisors, advisors.com, drjack@advisingtheadvisors.com. And again, if you're interested in the book and how you can attain that book, email me there. I also have a couple of bonuses that are going to come up at the end of the session here, and you can email me for those bonuses as well. You know, we knew about this, not we, but the ancient philosophers knew about all of this, and for some reason it never got passed on because Epictetus, a Greek philosopher, said people are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. So he understood that people thinking about what's going on in their lives cause the problems, not the things. So the anxiety, the first principle that I talked about was not from trying to maintain her work-life balance. The second client trying so hard to deal with budget issues, community expectations, and so forth, that didn't cause his stress. And staff shortages per se did not cause the third client's stress. For these people, their stress was caused by the conversations they had in their heads about these situations. And when you have conversations in your head that are negative, self-defeating, poisonous internal conversations, it spikes your stress and leads to things like a lack of confidence, depression, feeling overwhelmed, feeling helpless, feeling like you can't do anything about it and you're trapped. We've all had that negative self-defeating voice more often than we wish, obviously. It's interesting because I gave this presentation yesterday to a group of financial professionals, and one of the persons actually put in the chat box, I have spent my entire life believing that I'm a failure and I don't know how to get out of it. And this is a professional financial advisor feeling like a failure. And I was really impressed that he was willing to ask that question. Of course, we did it all anonymously. And then I addressed that for him. So for the first client, the conversation about the work-life balance that caused the stress might have been something like this. I don't know how to take more time with my family without feeling guilty about not taking the time to do everything I can to help my staff and students. For the client number two, the conversation inside her head about the struggle to balance budgets, etc., might be, what if I can't do more with less and I disappoint my community? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And for the third client, the conversation might have been something like, what if I cannot fill in the staff shortages? How in the world am I ever going to make this work? Now, there's good news here. The good news is that we can change our internal dialogue once we understand what it is. We can learn about our self-talk habits and take charge of them. And like all of us, for all of these clients, the conversations they had in their heads were long-standing, unfortunate self-talk habits that triggered something I call the imposter fear. The imposter fear, if I'm going to use a poker analogy, is something like this. Everybody who knows me thinks I'm a royal flush, but inside my head, I believe I'm no better than a pair of sixes. So the imposter fear is I'm not nearly as good as everyone around believes I am. And sooner or later, I'm going to screw things up and they'll figure it out. I'll be mortified. So many of us, so many professionals have had that fear. So instead of focusing on their talent and their skills and the successes that they've had, their self-talk is dominated by poisonous, self-defeating, toxic thoughts. These habits, by the way, come from something that I call iceberg core beliefs. Why is it called an iceberg core belief? Because as you know, an iceberg, you only see a tiny portion of it sticking above the water. The bulk of it is hidden under the water. And just like icebergs, our core beliefs are rarely conscious things we think about. They're in our unconscious, reinforced by years and years of repetition. We all grow up with a series of beliefs. Some learned from our parents, some modeled after our teachers, some learned from other people in our profession. We never screen them for their veracity. We just assume that if somebody who's omniscient or knows more than I do says these things or believes these things, it must be right. Let me give you some examples of negative, self-defeating iceberg beliefs that so many people buy into unconsciously. If I don't succeed with this particular student, it's my fault and I feel like a failure. Asking for help or you getting a mentor is a sign of weakness. There's a perfect way to do my job and I must struggle to maintain perfection because anything less makes me feel like a failure. I need to avoid confrontations with parents and school board people and supervisors at all costs. I don't know how to handle confrontations. In fact, I should please everybody I meet so they'll like me. How about this one? I don't have control over my personal happiness or my misery. It just happens. I'll never be capable of performing as well as my peers, and I just need to accept that fact. It's easier to avoid my difficulties and problems than to face them. If I fly under the radar, hopefully they'll just go away. By the way, in my book, in each chapter, I cite a teacher or a principal who has made it to become the best teacher of the year or the best administrator of the year and so forth, and what they did and how they did it. I decided to headline each of my chapters with someone that fits. How about this one? Students and parents and administrators see right through me and they know my inadequacies. How about this? I can't change my personality. It's in my DNA. I'm just like my father or my mother. Can't be changed. And finally, everyone who knows me is being fooled. They think I have more talent and ability than I really do. It's only a matter of time before my weaknesses will show, and that's the imposter fear. So here's the takeaway, ladies and gentlemen. It's the conversation, the thoughts and beliefs in your head about a situation or event that determines both your emotional and your behavioral responses. What's important to understand is that these conversations are either nutritious or toxic, and they're based on habits. And as I said, the good news is you can be in charge of your thinking habits. Psychologists now know that most, and by the way, I saw one or two mental health people on this call. I'm happy to see you, and you know this, that mental health people now know that most of the deficiencies, limitations, and problems that people have are essentially rooted in their self-talk. Those of you who've had any experience with mental health or helping people in that category know what cognitive behavioral therapy is. This whole movement comes out of this understanding that our self-talk really determines our emotions, our moods, our habits, and our behaviors. You know, it used to be when I was in graduate school studying to be a psychologist, we were taught Freudian psychotherapy, which was really based on things happening in your childhood that never get resolved. And it may take years for someone to get in touch with these things. We now know that's pretty much mumbo jumbo, that any problem that someone presents with, any mood problem, any emotion problem, any behavioral problem is probably based on something that they were thinking about 10 minutes before the problem showed up. And so it's all the self-talk. Now, learned scholars knew this centuries ago, as I already mentioned, but nobody listened. How about this one? Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor and philosopher, said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." Why didn't that get translated over the centuries? How about in the 1890s, William James, considered the father of psychology, in the 1890s said the greatest revolution of our generation is the discovery that human beings, by changing the inner attitudes of their minds, can change the outer aspects of their lives. And he also said this, which is so important. The greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. So it's all about your particular mindset. Your subconscious beliefs and habits since childhood determine all of your moods, your attitudes, your behaviors, and they're below the surface, driving our thinking. The unconscious is the driver of 90% of our mindset. And since it's the conscious mind that makes decisions, and that's only 10%, it explains why nothing really changes until you're aware of these unconscious habits and the drive that is uncovered and changed that can make all the difference. Incidentally, when I work with athletes or teachers, educators, or doctors or lawyers or anybody, I use a technique called self-hypnosis. I make self-hypnotic recordings for my clients. Why do I do that? Because that will help to get rid of the unconscious toxic habits we have and replace them with powerful, healthy habits. It's one of the fastest ways of changing those habits. Even though most people don't really know what hypnosis is, they've seen stage hypnotists and all of that mumbo jumbo. Hypnosis is a very simple technique. It's a relaxation technique where you're so relaxed that you're willing to accept ideas that work in your favor, and that's what hypnosis is. And it's been very powerful. All of my Olympic gold medal winners used my hypnotic recordings before they did their events. They practiced them for months beforehand, but then they used them before they did their events. Let me give you an example of how it's all about your thinking that determines the outcome. An example from my own life. It was a beautiful day in San Diego, a June day. The weather was perfect. My wife and I were about to board a plane to go to Maui in Hawaii because I was fortunate enough to be asked to keynote a conference there. And so 4 days free in Maui What gets better than that? Of course, everybody on the plane is happy. They're all excited. They're going to a wonderful place during a wonderful time of year. My wife sits near the window to my left. I'm on the aisle. She gets up shortly after the plane takes off and goes to the restroom. She then comes back and I say, I have to go to the restroom. So I go to the restroom and I come back and I'm sitting down in my seat on the aisle when the woman across the aisle from me is feverishly writing something on one of those little napkins that they give you. If you can see it through all of my stuff, one of those little airline napkins, and she's looking at me as she's writing. And I'm saying to myself, is she going to pass me a note? No, I haven't had a note passed to me by a female since sixth grade, and it happens so rarely, I can even name the person. Sally Benelli passed me a note in sixth grade. That's the last note I ever remember receiving. And I'm fantasizing, first of all, this woman sees I'm with someone. Secondly, I'm old enough probably to be her grandfather. What possibly could she be sending me a note about? And I can't wait to read it. And she hands me the note on this napkin, and here's the exact note. And it says, "Sir, I'm sorry to embarrass you, but I think you should know that the toilet seat cover is hanging out of the back of your pants." What? Oh my God. Now, I had a choice. I had a choice. I could choose to spend the rest of the 6-hour flight looking at my wife and out the window that she's sitting next to and never looking in the direction of this woman because of being embarrassed, and crank my neck in one direction and feel mortified and humiliated and embarrassed. That was choice number one. But I had other choices. I didn't have to think toxic thoughts like that. I could have made something positive out of something negative. And what I said to that young lady is, young lady, don't worry about embarrassing me. You actually gave me something I can use in every speech I give from now on. And I was very grateful and happy because now I had an exact example of how you could change your inner dialogue. You could take control of your inner dialogue so that good things happen. And I felt calm, and we were giggling the rest of the flight, and she was laughing and I was laughing. What a difference than if I had just used an old habit of getting mortified and wanting to avoid the situation. So it was the conversation I had in my head about that event that determined my mood, my anxiety, my stress, my anger, my embarrassment, whatever. So this revolution in psychology, which took place about 50 years ago, really is based on the fact that our internal conversations, our thinking habits, our subconscious negative beliefs about ourselves and our abilities, they're reinforced thousands of times unconsciously. Every time we say them, we tend to believe them even more. But you're not a prisoner of your past behavioral habits. You're not even a prisoner of your DNA. We now know you can change things that are in your DNA by consciously thinking about them and doing things like self-hypnosis. You can modify your mindset by understanding your self-defeating internal dialogue and belief systems and deciding to change those that aren't healthy. Let me give you some examples of deeply held, mostly unconscious statements that people make that often lead to out-of-kilter emotional reactions. Starting a sentence with "what if" almost always leads to something bad after that. Or "I hope I don't do this," or "I don't know how to do that," or "if I can only do this," or "maybe this will work," or "I should have done that," or "I probably won't be able to do this." Those are the kinds of habits that lead to negative emotions and behavioral outcomes, as opposed to "I know I can do this. I will be able to do this. I will make this work. I learned from this and I'll do this as a result." Those are the kinds of statements we need to change these things to. So is the voice in your head mostly toxic or healthy? Does it give you self-doubt, fear, anxiety, or worry about a situation? Or does the voice in your head raise your self-esteem, confidence, and encourage you in difficult times? I'm sure all of you have had students that don't speak up much. They don't raise their hands. They don't volunteer. It's because of the voice inside their head that's saying, "Don't make a mistake. Don't look foolish. People will tease you." if we just got at those voices and explained to people how they can take control of that and change it and take the risk to say what they want to say or ask what they want to say, it would be a huge, huge revolt in the difficulty and mental health issues that so many of our youngsters have. So the goal is always to create harmony between our mindset, our emotions, and our behaviors. We need to change the way we think about ourselves, and then you can change your beliefs about yourself. And once you change your beliefs about yourself, you can change the internal pharmacy, which impacts your health and longevity. So the most important skill you can learn for both your teaching career, your educational career, your administrative career, success, and for your overall health and longevity is to manage your stress. And we manage our stress from the inside out by taking charge of our internal self-talk and stopping the poisonous, self-destructive, toxic self-talk. We want to provide a spark that will build a fire of self-confidence in us and success and health from within. Now, I'm going to explain something about how this impacts our health because this involves every one of you. Neuroscience teaches us now that every thought we have, positive or negative, chemically and electronically transfers to every single cell in the body instantly. The average person has 60,000 thoughts a day. Can you imagine? 60,000 thoughts a day, and research shows that over 90% of those thoughts tend to be negative, leading to self-doubt, worry, insecurity, lack of confidence. Think about some of these thoughts that happen during the day. I hope this student doesn't do this. I hope I don't hear from that parent again. What if the principal is upset about that? What if the administrator or the school board doesn't do this? I'm having trouble with my teenagers at home. I can't stand looking at the news. It's all bad and scary. It goes on and on. We have thousands of these thoughts that go through our mind every day that are negative, self-defeating, and lead to negative emotions. And negative emotions like fear, anxiety, and stress resulting from toxic self-talk wire into the brain 1,000 times faster than positive emotions. We remember negative things a lot better than we remember positive things. That's to protect us. That came from a survival mechanism from our ancient reptilian brain, which developed centuries before our cortex. It was the brain that made us react to things so that we could avoid danger. And we still have that as part of our brain, and it's still working. When we had to fight down predators or hunt down our food, that was the main brain that we used to turn on what we call, as you know, the fight or flight nervous system when there was danger around. So we all have this, and negative self-talk is normal. They're remnants of our old lives when we had to be super vigilant to stay alive. That part of your brain that provides the fight or flight response is the ancient amygdala, developed millions of years before the cortex, which thinks, plans, and is creative. So the amygdala doesn't differentiate between a lion chasing you from worrying about your work-life balance. It doesn't differentiate between someone pointing a gun at you from trying to manage tight budgets and navigate complex school boards. And it doesn't differentiate between the fear connected with getting mugged in an alley from worrying about staff shortages. The default is turn on the fight or flight. It doesn't know if it's a real emergency or not, but it's not taking chances. So any toxic thought leads to stress hormones flowing, even if you're not in danger. Every toxic thought leads to stress hormones flowing, energy going into your arms and legs for the fight or flight, pumping up your heart, raising your blood pressure, which you would need if you were in a dangerous situation. But in the normal circumstances, it's not healthy to do that and leads to high blood pressure problems, cardiovascular issues, and so forth. And at the same time that it's doing all of these things to try to protect you, it wants to shut down any system that isn't necessary so that all the energy can be focused on protecting you. And one of the systems it shuts down is your immune system. Every time you think a negative, self-defeating thought, it stimulates hormones that turn on the fight or flight nervous system, and it shuts off your immune system for a period of time. So think about it. If you're having negative self-defeating toxic thoughts 30, 40 times a day, each time you're shutting off your immune system. Is it any wonder then why so many people get ill and the doctors don't really know why you're ill because the blood tests look normal? They give you pills for the illness. They don't know what it is, but they figure the pills will help you. It's because you put yourself under this stress and you've shut down your immune system, and it all can be fixed. It all can be fixed. When you go to see a cognitive behavioral psychologist or psychiatrist, or, well, mostly psychologists or clinical social worker, people like that, coaches who do that, they can help you get fixed in a relatively short period of time. You do not have to live this way, and it'll impact your system medically. Let's talk about some of these things that can happen to you medically if you don't take charge of this. If you're thinking toxic thoughts during the day, traffic issues, your kids, the news, the kids at school, impatience dealing with colleagues or subordinates, dealing with your teenagers, you name it. Each time you shut down the immune system, and how does your health get impacted? Well, blood starts leaving the GI tract and goes out to your arms and legs for the fight or flight situation. So if blood is constantly leaving your GI tract to flow into the muscles of your arms and legs, preparing for the fight or flight or freeze reaction, that leads to nausea, vomiting, energy loss, chronic digestive problems, things like gastritis, colitis, irritable bowel syndrome. I can't tell you in my 47 years how many patients I've had sent to me from GI doctors who say they have the symptoms, but we don't know the cause. Irritable bowels, gastritis, colitis, and I used cognitive behavioral psychology to turn this around along with self-hypnosis. How about this? The muscles constantly tightening up causes muscle strain. It can cause pain in your neck and in your back. It can cause migraine and tension headaches. It can cause jaw clenching problems and TMJ issues. And all of that causes fatigue. How about this? Whenever you turn on the fight or flight nervous system, glucose spills into the bloodstream. Why? Because you need energy for the fight or flight. Even though you're not in an emergency situation, the amygdala doesn't know it's doing the default thing. So what do you think happens if glucose is spilling into your bloodstream consistently? It makes you prone to diabetes and things of that nature, or makes the diabetes worse if you already have it. I mentioned before, if your blood pressure is high because you're facing danger, like say it's 180 over 130, when you're facing someone who's threatening your life, your body is reacting appropriately. But if your pressure is 180 over 130 several mornings a week, as you get ready to go to school and face the problems that you're anticipating, then you're at great risk for cardiovascular problems and hypertension, which is high blood pressure, which leads to kidney damage. And chronic hypertension also causes nervousness and pressure. Here's the one that most of you will be able to identify with. One of the things that happens when you turn on the fight or flight nervous system, ladies and gentlemen, is adrenaline squirts into your bloodstream to give you energy and make you alert to deal with the danger. If you're going to bed at night and in your mind you're thinking about things that happen during the day that are upsetting, or things that you're anticipating going to happen the next day that upset you, you're squirting adrenaline into your bloodstream. That makes you alert, which prevents you from getting sleepy. So many people have trouble falling asleep at night, or they fall asleep and wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning. It's because they filled their minds with stuff that's turning on the fight or flight and squirting adrenaline into their bloodstream. Now, we can look at the opposite of all of this. We can look at the power of positive thinking by simply looking at placebos. You know, placebos are medications that are given when they test drugs that have nothing in them except sugar. They're sugar pills. And they say they're going to test a new drug for anxiety, to lower anxiety. They give one group of people the real medication that they're testing. And then they give another group of people, they don't know who's getting what, a placebo, something that does nothing. It's just sugar pill. The research shows that in all of these studies, no matter what the pill is, at least 20 to 30% of the people getting the sugar pills get better. How could that happen? Because they're telling themselves they're taking a pill that's good for them and something good is going to happen. That's a great example of using your mind in a powerfully positive way instead of a toxic way. So if we can convert our thinking that way, it'll work for us every time we do it. It has a positive effect. I could give you tons of studies of placebos and what happens. I'm going to just give you one more to show you the power of this. After World War II, many veterans came back with leg and knee injuries that required arthroscopic knee surgery, which was just in its infancy then. Arthroscopic knee surgery. These people were crippled up from injuries and wounds that they got in the war. They decided to do a study with 500 of these men. Half of them were brought into the doctor's office, the surgeon's office. He explained that he's going to give them an anesthesia, put them to sleep. He's going to make a small incision around their knees, take out the damaged cartilage or whatever the issue might be, and then sew them back up, and they'll just need to go to physical therapy for a month or two, and they'll be fit as a fiddle. He told that to everybody, actually. But what he did was with half of the people, he did the surgery. With the other half of the people, he brought them into the operating room. They were awake. He gave them the anesthesia. They went to sleep. They then brought them to the recovery room. No surgery was done. And they woke up and they went home with the same instructions. You just need to go to physical therapy for a couple of months and you'll be fine. They found that 40% of the people who didn't have the surgery recovered from physical therapy alone, where they believed before that physical therapy would not be able to do the trick without the surgery because of all the loose pieces that were floating around. But these people believed the surgery was a success, even though they had no surgery. And that belief system is what changed everything in your body. So taking charge of our internal dialogue is the first thing we do. And as I mentioned, hypnosis is a powerful tool for that. So now let's talk about the other thing I said I was going to do for you. And again, you're not going to be able to take notes because I'm going to go through this fast. It's my mental toughness routine that's proven itself hundreds of times, not only with athletes, but with executives, with teachers, with doctors, with lawyers. And this is a technique that if you're interested in this and you don't want the whole book, I can send this to you in an email. You just have to email me and say, please send me the mental toughness routine. What is mental toughness? It's a powerful 7-step technique that I have that's just one of the 77 things in the book, and it takes less than 5 minutes. And you use this for quickly reducing stress, self-doubt, worry, anxiety. Whenever these emotions creep in and you recognize you're having the emotion, that's when you use this technique. Now, mental toughness involves looking at every challenge as an opportunity instead of every challenge as being overwhelming. It's the ability to bring your A game consistently with whatever you're trying to do. The ability to bounce back quickly from any adversity, such as worrying about your work-life balance or telling yourself that you're not going to be able to deal with staff shortages and it's going to be devastating. And it's 7 steps, but it's really simple. 5 minutes, you can do this. And once you practice it, it happens very easily. Whenever you experience any negative emotion, anxiety, fear, upset, impatience, anger, depression, you use these 7 steps. So here we go. Step 1, first you have to recognize that you're feeling some kind of negative emotion, stress, anxiety, whatever. And you ask yourself, what was the thought that I had just before I realized I'm feeling down or uptight or worried? What was the thought I had? It was probably a series of thoughts. I tell people in the beginning, actually write these things down instead of just thinking it in your head. Step 2, I want each of you to have one of these rubber bands, the kind that come in the mail. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but this is called the number 64 rubber band. It's the same kind that comes in the mail. You can buy it in a store if you don't have any. It's a fat rubber band that will sit loosely on your wrist. Snap the rubber band to stop the thoughts dead in its tracks. Now, you're going to have to snap it several times, because these thoughts are habits. They want to keep repeating themselves. But if you keep snapping the rubber band and get a little twinge of pain, your subconscious mind will want to stop the thoughts. That's step 2. Step 3 now is very important. We want to do what we call diaphragmatic breathing, breathing from behind your diaphragm, the same kind of breathing that professional singers are taught, professional musicians are taught, and now I teach it to all the athletes and so forth. And here's how you do diaphragmatic breathing. You can practice this right now by folding your hands over your stomach. When I say go, you breathe in through your nose to the count of 4, and I'll count it for you. You hold it for 4 seconds, then a big exhale like you're blowing out through a straw to the count of 7. So when I say go, you breathe in. Go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 2, 3, 4. Out through your mouth. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If your hand was moving as you breathed in and your hand moved back in when you breathed out, when you exhaled, then you're doing it properly. If only your shoulders and chest move, that's anxious breathing. That is not relaxed diaphragmatic breathing. You can practice this watching TV. Just have your hands on your stomach and practice these deep breaths in through your mouth and then blow out through a straw out through your, in through your nose, and blow out through a straw out through your mouth. You'll use that in many parts of your life. So step 3 is to take deep centering breaths. Step 4, ask yourself some key questions about these trigger thoughts that you recognize, like, where's the evidence to support my anxiety-producing thoughts? Am I just making this up because I'm worried? What's the probability that what I'm afraid of will actually happen? Could I be exaggerating the situation in my mind? Am I turning a minor setback into a major catastrophe? Are my conclusions based on emotions rather than facts? And I have many other questions that I'll send you related to questioning the thoughts. So you're now starting to change the thoughts because you're realizing I'm my own worst enemy here with these thoughts. Step 5, I call this your personal highlight reel. It's very important for all of you to have a memory, like a video in your head, of one of the most successful experiences you had. It could be on your job. It could have been with students. It could have been with parents. It could have been with administrators. It could have been doing a presentation. But what was that very acceptable, excitable success you had? Visualize it in as much detail as you can. Now, why are we doing this? Because when people are negative, they think about negative experiences they've had. They forget about the positives. They're not registering. I want you to all have at least one personal highlight reel of some success that you had and use it as step 5 in this mental toughness routine. Look at the thoughts that were producing your negative emotions and visualize the greatest personal success as if it's a movie to challenge those thoughts. And step 6, you can dispute the toxic thoughts that you had and replace them with positive, rational thoughts like I did on the airplane. So if you're saying to yourself, how can I please my family and still give my job and the students the attention they deserve? Change it to something like, I don't need to be focused on my job and career 24/7 in order to be very successful at it. I will make a concerted effort to devote an appropriate proportion of my time to my family, who support me totally. If the thought was, what if I can't do more with less and I disappoint my community? Change that to, I can get professional budget experts to help me work efficiently with what opportunities I have, and I can have open communications with my community to resolve their concerns. I don't have to be perfect to be a wonderful administrator in my career. If the thought was, what if I can't fill the staff shortages? Change it to something like, I can consult with principals all over the United States who have similar issues and learn how they resolve them. And step 7, we want to anchor this with another centering breath. So let me give you the steps again, but again, you can write to me and I'll send you the list. Step 1, you know that you have a negative emotion like depression, anxiety, stress, worry. Recognize what the thoughts were that led to that. Number 2, use the rubber band to stop those thoughts dead in their tracks. Number 3, do the deep centering breath to calm yourself down. Number 4, ask yourself challenging questions that challenge those thoughts, that show that those thoughts that you had aren't true and that they're just harmful. Step 5, have a personal highlight reel in your mind where you can visualize when you've been successful in a situation like this. Step 6, dispute those thoughts with rational, healthy, nutritious thoughts. Step 7, anchor the technique with another centering breath. Now we're going to conclude in just a minute or two, but I want to tell you about a couple of bonuses that I'm offering for this group, because I'm really impressed with what you do here and what Arlen does on a weekly basis here. And so the first is, anybody in this group, if you're interested in a complimentary coaching session with me, the first 10 people who email me requesting it, I will give you a complimentary, no obligation, free coaching session. Just email me at drjack@advisingtheadvisors.com. Secondly, if any of you are in a situation where you're looking for in-service training for teachers, I do that all the time. I will give anyone in attendance here a 25% discount. And by the way, since COVID, we do a lot of these this way through Zoom. It doesn't have to be in person. And so we can do it that way, or we can do it in person. So in closing, there's 2 types of speakers you can do without: those who never stop to think and those who never think to stop. So I'm going to stop at this point and open it up for questions.
Wonderful, Jack. Thank you so much for sharing these strategies. Love the 7 steps. That is terrific information. Maybe we can get that put together on a slide to send out to people after the when I send the recording link tomorrow.
Absolutely.
First question we've got coming in from Scott, Dr. Jack, is, can you address the widespread use of medications such as Xanax to help calm people's anxieties? Are these helpful, or do you believe they are not necessary?
Terrific question. Of course, you're asking a psychologist. If you ask this question of a psychiatrist, you would get a very different answer, I suspect. Although I know a psychiatrist who doesn't believe in medication, so that's one exception. In any case, those medications are important. In fact, 2 of my children take Xanax, not on a regular basis, but on an as-needed basis, because they have anxiety disorders and won't listen to me. One of them is an attorney, and her boss read one of my books and said, "You should read your father's book," and she refuses to do it. So she's a high-strung, type A, anxious-filled person who uses Xanax when she can't handle it anymore, instead of the routine that I just taught you that she could do in 5 minutes. That's very frustrating. So the answer to the question is, these medications work, but they only work on the symptom, not the cause. If the cause is your internal dialogue, you're always going to have the symptoms. So my goal is to work, if someone needs the medication in the meantime until they learn how to change their thinking, fine, take it on an as-needed basis in the meantime. But our goal is to get to the underlying cause, which is the toxic thoughts. You will then never need the medication.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Jack. Let's see if we've got any other questions coming into the chat. Feel free to raise your hand using the reactions pod below if you've got a question you'd like to share out verbally on the microphone with Dr. Jack while we've got him here. Otherwise, you feel free to use chat. And we'll spend the next bit of our time just addressing any questions or thoughts or reactions to this presentation.
You know, let me explain that. A lot of people in the audience right now have questions, but they're saying, I'm afraid to ask it, or it's a silly question, or I don't want to be embarrassed. You can do it anonymously. You don't have to have your name in there. I think there's a way to do it anonymously. You don't have to worry about the question. That's just that internal critic. In fact, the first book I wrote was Conquering Your Internal Critic. So you can sing your own song, because everyone has that little voice that shuts them down, and that's the negative, toxic voice. So please don't let that get in the way of you asking a question, or you can send me an email with the question and I'll address it directly.
Perfect. Looks like Chad has got a question here for you, Dr. Jack. What is your take on radical acceptance coping statements, and when and how to use them?
To be perfectly frank, Chad, I have no idea what radical acceptance coping statements are. That must be some new technique that I'm not aware of. I don't know what that is, but I like coping statements. I don't know what radical acceptance coping statements are. So that may be a new technique that I really should probably find out about.
And Chad, I've just made it possible for you to unmute yourself if you wanted to explain that question further and give us an example of a radical acceptance coping statement. You can unmute and do that on the mic.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can
Yes,
hear
sounds
you.
good, Chad.
The statements I have here, my wife actually found them for me, an article that I'll just read through them real quick. These are the coping statements from the situation is only temporary. I can't change what has already happened. I have dealt with difficulties before and I can deal with this. I may not like it, but this is what has happened. How I react in this situation is what I can control in this moment. I don't have control over the past. Those are just a few examples.
Those are excellent. In fact, if you wouldn't mind emailing me those, that's great. I can put that into my speeches because those are excellent coping statements. I wouldn't call them radical. They're wonderful because they're true. So, I always tell people, especially think about an elite athlete who has a bad game. Those are the kinds of things they have to say to themselves. I teach them that. I just never call them radical coping statements. What did I learn from this? And I can move on and be better. And part of that, by the way, is another seminar that I do on optimistic thinking. That's part of optimistic thinking, which means you take something bad that happened to you, but there's an optimistic way of dealing with it instead of a pessimistic way. And we know that those who use optimistic self-coping mechanisms when that happens are very successful after that, even after a disaster. So, Chad, if you wouldn't mind sending me those two or the link to it to Dr. Jack at Advising the Advisors, I'd really appreciate that.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chad, for coming on the mic. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Margaret
Thanks,
just
Harlan.
popped a question in. What is the full title of the book again, Jack? Do you want me to put that slide back up real quick?
Yeah, put the slide up.
There we go.
There it is. Whoops, there it is. And you can get it on Amazon. It's either 27 or 37. But again, if you want the e-version, which I can send you, it's 15. The e-version is one of the early edits of it. They won't let me send you the final version, but it's got everything in it you need. It just may have some yellow highlighted things and things because we didn't complete the editing, but it's got everything in it. It's not in the final version like you would get in the book. It's got marks and things like that in a couple of places, but it's got all the information you need.
Excellent. I'm also going to put up your contact information so that people can reach out to you about the free coaching session.
Right.
First 10 of the attendees to this webinar who email Dr. Jack will get the free coaching session. So we appreciate you doing that for our participants, Jack.
Sure, it's my pleasure. Any other questions? Now, many of you probably know someone or you yourself have had chronic illnesses. You probably could sense that through my conversation, I've treated many people with these problems using the techniques I'm telling you, and I've been extremely satisfied with the results. So if you have relatives who have chronic illnesses or they have been satisfied with the treatment they're getting, it may be because they're not dealing with the stress, and the stress is caused by the thoughts, et cetera, et cetera. Almost all of my private clients have come over the years from physicians who are scratching their heads and they know the symptoms are there, but they don't know why.
And Chad just posted a link to those acceptance coping statements in the chat. So if anybody wants to get access to those, feel free to open the chat window, and Chad's latest post there provides a link to the radical acceptance coping statements. And we'll get those to you too, Dr. Jack.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions that have come in the last couple of minutes. So if we want to move to close, or any final thoughts from you, Dr. Jack, before we shut down the webinar?
Well, I just want to tell you that no matter what's happened to you in the past that has been devastating or heartbreaking, you can overcome this. It starts with changing your thinking style and looking forward to a future that's positive, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in administration, whether it's in your home life, whatever it is, you can change things. Nothing that's happened to you that's negative has to stay with you for the rest of your life. Don't ever give up on those things and develop memories of wonderful successes you've had. That's critically important for everybody to do.
Love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Jack Singer, for being with us this afternoon. Feel free to thank Dr. Jack in the chat as we're logging out here. I'm going to stop the recording.